Okay guys, so Logic Pro X 10.5, the biggest update we've seen to Logic for absolutely years. I'm a little bit late making a video on this because I've been working trying to get some money together during the lockdown. Okay, now obviously I'm going to do proper full in-depth tutorials on all these new sections of Logic. And you know what my tutorials are like. I don't just show you the basic, this does that, that does that, but I show you ways that you can use these features as well. So those tutorials will be coming down the line as I make them one by one. This is just a general walk around. I'm going to show you, talk about the new features and just pinpoint all the stuff. Okay, so the bottom line with this 10.5 is that they've brought over a lot of the good features from GarageBand for iOS. And if you think that in some way that reduces Logic or makes it less professional, then you're wrong. And you really have no idea how powerful GarageBand for iOS is. It's incredibly powerful. And I've been making GarageBand for iOS tutorials ever since I was turned on to it at the end of last year, and in all those tutorials I've been begging Apple to bring the features of GarageBand iOS across to Logic because they are more powerful than the features that Logic has. And hallelujah, Apple have done it. I don't know if I've had any influence on that. I know the Apple development team watches my videos because they've written to tell me that they do. But anyway, we've got a lot of the features, the key stuff that's come over from GarageBand for iOS. So we've got live loops now, and this is like a compositional and arranging section. It's kind of like Ableton in that you can compose with it, but you can also use it to work out arrangements by performing live arrangements of the parts that you've created, the sections that you've created, etc., etc. We've still got, of course, the traditional linear sequencing arrange area here. You can have the two windows working in tandem and they interact with each other, and you can do techniques to utilize both sides of the window at the same time, or you can work exclusively in live loops, or you can work exclusively in the traditional linear way. So more on that in a minute. So we've got live loops across from GarageBand iOS, and we've got the beat sequencer, which has been ported across from GarageBand iOS. But they're now calling it the step sequencer because in GarageBand iOS, the beat sequencer is used exclusively for creating drum patterns. But now they've ported it across to Logic. They've added some extra features which allows you to also use it for sequencing pitched instruments. So every step can have a different note pitch, a different octave, a different gate time. Steps can be offset in time to bring them forward or back, etc., etc. But otherwise it works as a TR style grid sequencer, but it can also work as a TB303 roll and bassline style step sequencer. You can tie notes together, pitch notes, etc., etc. Okay, so that's the two major things that have come over from GarageBand iOS. Also coming across from GarageBand iOS are these remix effects. I mean, GarageBand on the iPad, iPhone, etc. These remix effects live across your final master left right, and you can perform filter and stutter and chopping type effect, repeat and chopping type effects over your whole mix. But bringing this over to Logic, they've made it so that we can use this on individual tracks, we can use it on group bus tracks, we can use it across the whole mix, whatever we like. Okay, and this can write your mix of, your sort of filter moves, etc. It can write them to track automation. So that's the third thing they've brought over from GarageBand iOS. And the final thing they've brought over from GarageBand iOS is the content packs, by the look of it, because they've definitely brought over Flex and Flow and other packs. So basically, a huge amount of content has been, all the content packs have been ported across from GarageBand for iOS And they are very good indeed. I mean, I know them from using GarageBand iOS. Very, very, very good drum kits, all in a contemporary style of dance, electronic genres, but also a heavy emphasis on hip hop, rap, trap, grime, R&B, neo soul, that kind of thing. So not only would you get a colossal amount of new, because these are all drum kits. I mean, the old drum machine designer kits are built in here. Look, there's After Party, there's Beat Machine, there's Big Room, etc. So we've still got the old drum machine design, but these are all new drum machine designer kits. Look how many there are. So not only do we get all that contemporary new kits, but as they've ported over the packs from GarageBand iOS, we also get those packs with the classic drum machines. So we've got the LinnDrum, we've got the CR8000, we've got the Roland 707 and 727, we've got the CR78, 606, we've got the 808 and 909, and these are in pure form, sort of unprocessed. We've even got the side drum tracks there, look, sequential drum tracks, and we've got the Simmons SDS5. So lots of juicy old school drum boxes, as well as a mass of contemporary new ones, covering all sorts of genres from house, all sorts of house genres, techno, and as I say, all those urban, for want of a better word, styles. Rap, hip hop, etc. Okay, so that's the 4 things that have been ported over from GarageBand for iOS. Live loops, the beat sequencer, the remix effects, and the content packs. And by the way, you also get a huge amount of new loops and instrument sounds as well from those content packs. Plus there's more that's been added as well. Now on top of that, the other key thing with Logic 10.5 is there are 4 new instruments. Completely new instruments, right? There's an instrument track here. So the new instruments are the drum synth, which could be opened in mono or stereo. And it does what it says on the tin. It's a drum synthesizer. Now this is very, very, very lightweight, this instrument. It's got a very tiny CPU footprint. And it does all different drum synthesis in different categories. You've got presets here, but on the panel itself there are presets as well. You can create and save your own. So you've got different synthesis controls in the different categories. So you can do synthesis kicks, snares and claps, percussion, or hats and cymbals, and there's always the presets there as well as in here, right? That's one of the new instruments, and this features in the newly completely redesigned from the ground up drum machine designer, but it can work by itself standalone on a track. That's a new drum synth, and then there are 2 new samplers. There is the multi-sampler, which is used for loading sample sets, where you've got multi-sampled patches across the keys, velocity switching, different velocity layers and all the rest of it. And this new main sampler instrument completely replaces the XS24, which is gone forever. So the new sampler instrument can be opened in mono, stereo or multi-out mode. And this is it, and it replaces the XS24, and it is more pleasant to look at, I must say. The controls are better laid out in terms of, easier to see, easier to operate, etc. And these are the main bits: the synthesis bit, the mod matrix, and the actual modulators here, envelopes and LFO, etc. And you can bring in the mapping and the zones. This is, it's no less complicated than the XS24. It'll still take a hell of a lot of learning, particularly the mapping and zone stuff, which is incredibly cryptic, but it's just nicer laid out, and it's, it loads all the old XS24 patches, sample sets, as well as new stuff. And incidentally, they've built Flex into the samplers now, so that you can play a sample up and down the keys, and as it goes up and down in pitch, it will not speed up or slow down. That's part of this sampler and the other sampler I'm going to show you in a second. Before this was implemented, if you wanted to play back a sample over different keys and have it stay the same length, whatever pitch it was, you had to load the sample into Alchemy. Okay, so this is the replacement for EXS24, which is just called Sampler. But there's a second sampler called Quick Sampler, which can only load one sample, and it can be opened in mono or stereo. Now again, I don't know if I've had any influence on Apple in this area. As I said, they do. They've written to me to tell me that they do watch my videos. And they do keep an eye on my channel. Well, remember a few months back, I did that video on Akai MPC-1 versus GarageBand on iOS, which infuriated Akai so much they forced YouTube to take the video down from YouTube. Remember that? Well, I don't know if that's had any influence on the Apple team, but basically with this Quick Sampler, they've given us all the slicing stuff that the Akai MPC-1 does, and I'm, machine and what have you. Now, like the drum synth, this is an incredibly lightweight instrument in terms of its CPU footprint, and it is used, like the drum synth, as the engine to power cells of the newly designed Drum Machine Designer, which we'll look at in a minute. It can only load a single sample. Now in Drum Machine Designer, where it's used on every single drum cell, it loads a one-shot drum sample where that cell is playing a sample. So basically you can drag loops in here from the Apple Loops or your own audio from your Finder, or you can click on here and I'll just quickly show. I'll put in an Amen break. I know there's an Amen break on here because I can't remember the name of other breaks, so I know there's an Amen break on here somewhere. Come on. Okay, there we are. Amen short. Now, I can either select the sample I want to load. I've got the option, if I bring in options here, of importing it with all the original tuning, loudness, looping and length, or it can be optimized on load to optimize tuning, loudness and search for loop points and crop silence, etc. I can choose either of those and hit open and it will be brought into the sampler, or I can just, from this window which pops up when you click on here, or from your general Finder window, you can just drag and drop it in, and then you get the same options when you drag and drop. Bring it in original or optimized, so I'll bring it in original. Cancel that now. Okay, there's the single sample, and you can trim the start point in the sample window and trim the end point, and you can do a fade out and you can do a fade in, and again this sampler includes flex, so you can set the flex on it so that you can play the sample up and down the keys if it's a pitch sample, and it will stay the same length. It won't, as it speeds up or slows down. Okay, now you can operate, you can fire off the sample in different modes. Classic mode is that the sample will play back for as long as you hold the key down. Right. One-shot mode is traditionally used for drum samples. You don't want the drum notes in your drum patterns to have to be the right length to make sure each drum sample plays its full length. With one-shot triggering, and anyone who's used old hardware samplers knows this, one-shot triggering means that you just, all the sample needs is an on note command, and it will play through its entire length. So I'll just shorten it to do this. So I can just hit the key and let go. And in one-shot mode, it plays all the way through as soon as it receives a note on command. It doesn't matter about the note off command, it will play all the way through. Oh, that's my alarm going off. And then look in classic mode there, you see there's the flex thing. You can switch on flex. So in classic mode, as you play it up and down the keys, it will not change speed. And you've got different modes: playback, forward, reverse, You can set a loop up and have the loop being forward, reverse, or alternate, goes backwards and forwards, blah, blah, and then play. To end on release can be ticked, so that if you do set up a loop on a pitch type sample, as you then release the key, if you've got to the loop point, it will then play to the end of the sample when you release the key, etc., etc. So it's classic one shot, but it does slicing as well. As soon as you click the slicing button, the transients are analysed. You know, that's using the smart tempo and flex technology already built into Logic. And as soon as the slices are analysed, each slice is assigned to a MIDI note, and this is the Akai MPC-1 stuff. You can immediately play those slices from your MIDI keys. Like that. Fantastic stuff. Now, each slice is given a MIDI note. The starting key is here. You can change that if you want. You can make the ascent of those MIDI notes assigned to each slice chromatic by default, or you can assign to white or black keys only, etc., etc. And so you can slice a sample and immediately play it from the MIDI keyboard. Fantastic stuff. Absolutely fantastic. But now, if you want, you can export those slices to Drum Machine Designer, and it does the old school recycle thing. Right? It'll export every slice to its own drum pad and create a MIDI note, exactly the length of each slice of the pitch to trigger that slice, and put that MIDI pattern onto the track so that those MIDI notes in the order of each slice will play back the loop, but playing back each slice individually in time, one after the other. Let me just trim that end sliver off like that. Right, so we'll do that. We'll export it to the new Drum Machine Designer, and then we'll look at that. Create Drum Machine Designer track. Boom. And incidentally, just before we look at this, incidentally, you will have noticed you can export the slices to Drum Machine Designer, which also creates, there's the MIDI pattern of the notes in ascending order, each one triggering the slices, but you also have the option to copy the MIDI pattern. That means you can load in loops, drum loops, or other loops that have a very specific feel or timing, analyze them for the slicing, and you've got the sensitivity you can use on that to make the analysis more or less strong. And you can extract the timing of the MIDI pattern from that. By copying MIDI pattern, it will copy the MIDI notes of each slice, but it copies them with their exact timing. So you can do all that as well, right? Okay, so we've exported all the slices. Let's close this now. This is the new sampler, quick sampler instrument. We've exported all those slices to Drum Machine Designer, and now every slice is living on its own drum pad with the same note numbers that were allocated when the sample was sliced in Quick Sampler. So there is the different slices, and they're organised on the pads, working across from the first note, first slice C1, across and up and up and up, and then across to the next page until all the slices are loaded. Right? And a MIDI pattern has been created. Each one of these MIDI notes triggers the slice that it's assigned to, and the length of that note is exactly the length of the slice. So this pattern will play all of those slices of that loop one by one in the correct order, like this. Like that. Yeah, all that good stuff, son. You know what I'm saying? No, I'm saying sweet as a nut, son. Right, let's close the editor down there for a minute. Okay, so that gives us now the final thing. Drum Machine Designer. It's been completely designed from the ground up all over again. Let's look at it on a different kit. This hard bounce kit here. This is the new Drum Machine Designer. And where a drum cell is playing a sample, which is most of the drum cells, the engine behind Drum Machine Designer for sample drum slots is now the Quick Sampler. So look, there's the kick, and if we open up the stack, there's the kick track, there's its channel, and there's the Quick Sampler. So for every single drum cell and its corresponding, oh, I've gone over to the other page. For every single drum cell, that's snare 1, this one here, there's its track. For every single drum cell that has a sample, that is firing off a drum sample, you go to its track and there's a quick sampler on the mixer channel for that track. So basically, a Drum Machine Designer is now a stack of tracks, each one with a quick sampler on it, firing off a sample, all assigned to the Drum Machine Designer interface where you can play it and trigger it, etc. But this is the interesting thing. Look at this. If I choose the Drum Machine Designer track itself and build my patterns on that Drum Machine Designer main group bus track, I'm hitting MIDI notes and they're triggering the individual drums by note number. C1 for the kick, D1 for the snare, C sharp 1 for the rim, etc, etc. D sharp 1 for the clap. But because every single drum cell has a track and channel with a let's do it with the clap. Because every single drum cell and its accompanying track has, look, let's find the clap, there it is, clap 1, has a quick sampler on it. If you select the track for the individual drum sound, then you play the MIDI keyboard, you're playing that one sample up and down the keys. So you can do pitched patterns for individual drums on their own track, and overall patterns just triggering the drums at their root pitch on the main track. Yeah? That's pretty clever, isn't it? I bet you haven't seen that in other tutorials you've watched so far, and this isn't even a tutorial. So I could go into the clap and play my, because remember, behind the clap pad is a quick sampler, and if we address the quick sampler on its own track, which is a sub-track of Drum Machine Designer assigned to this pad, then we're triggering the quick sampler, in which case it behaves as the quick sampler, allowing us to play that sample at any pitch we want. But if we go to the main track, we're just triggering the pads with their assigned MIDI note numbers at their default pitch. Whoop, let's go. Okay. So, yeah, this is the new Drum Machine Designer. Now, every single drum pad that fires a sample, as I said, it's powered in the background by the new quick sampler. So there's the kick, and I go to the kick track and open the quick sampler for that track, and there's the quick sampler. But you get the quick sampler built into the Drum Machine Designer as well. So there's the quick sampler for the kick track opened independently, and there's exactly the same quick sampler underneath when I select this kick pad. You know, all the same features are here, but on Drum Machine Designer, to get to the different sections of quick sampler firing off that kick, we step through the different parts of the quick sampler in pages. So I'm looking at the main window where I can trim the sample start and end and do a fade in, fade out, etc. Then I can switch to the sampler details where I get all the filters, the LFO, envelopes and what have you, and then finally pad controls. And these are smart controls assigned to different parameters of the synthesis and parameters that you can adjust to modify it, as well as a reverb send and delay, because like the old Drum Machine Designer kits, inside each Drum Machine Designer stack there is a reverb and delay return. So you can send out from any drum to the reverb or delay to add reverb or delay to any drum in the stack you want. And you know, it works the same as the old Drum Machine Designer. If you're a more deep Logic user, you know what I'm talking about now, which means that you can build your own Drum Machine Designer stacks, and you can put any channels in that stack you want. So you can put in parallel compression channels and ascend for those, and etc, etc. You can have anything in there you want, right? You can group your drums onto buses which can live inside the stack, etc, etc. So that's the final new instrument, the completely redesigned from the ground up Drum Machine Designer. Now, usually most of the drum pads on the factory kits that load are sample-based drum pads being powered in the background by a quick sampler, which lives on the track for the individual drum. However, any individual drum pad can do drum synthesis. So if I choose this empty pad here, now I can drag an Apple loop to this pad and it will be loaded into a quick sampler. I can drag any sound sample from my Finder and drop it onto here, and a quick sampler will be created for this pad and its track and channel, and the sample will be loaded and everything. But also I can do this. I have to create a track for it first with the plus. Right, I've created a track for it now, and it's been given a title, Instrument 63. There's its newly created track and channel. And on the channel for that track, for this newly initiated pad, on the instrument slot, I put the drum synth in mono or stereo. And now a pad has a drum synth, so you can do analog synthesis on pads as well as samples on pads. If a sample is what's on the pad, its accompanying track and channel has a quick sampler on. If you're using drum synthesis for a pad, then its track and channel has a drum synth on, and you can mix and match drum synthesis sounds with sample sounds for your kits, which is fan-bloody-tastic, son. You know what I'm saying? So that's Drum Machine Designer, completely redesigned from the ground up, and that's your lot. That's all the new stuff, really. You know, there's probably some other minor bits. You know, I haven't upgraded to Logic since 10.4.4. I didn't upgrade to 10.4.5, 6, 7 or 8. I think there were those ones. So this new look where the graphics are flatter and everything, that could have come in before. But I'm running this on an old 2014 iMac. 3.4 gig iMac, the last of the big iMacs that Apple made before they switched to the 5K screens. And I've had to set up Catalina on an SSD. I've got a new SSD drive attached to the Mac via USB 3, and I installed Catalina on that and installed Logic on it, and it's running very nippy. It's nice and nippy and quick, and it seems quite light. Okay. But that's your main meat and potatoes of all the new stuff. Now look, I'm going to come back and do proper tutorials on all this stuff. But just basically to finish, because I've shown you a little bit of detail, a little bit of some of the things that the other features do. So let's just look at the last two bits I haven't really shown you, which is the new step sequencer, but I keep on calling it beat sequencer because that's what it's called in GarageBand iOS. And the live loops. So starting with the beat sequencer, let me just close the window there. If I get an instrument track and I get my pencil tool, I've already assigned right click to my pencil tool, and I pencil in a region, it's always going to be a MIDI region on an instrument. You can't well, unless there's a key command you can hold down to do that. I haven't found that yet. If you pencil in a region on an instrument track, it's always going to be a traditional MIDI region that opens Piano Edit. Right? And as I said, there may be a key override that allows you to pencil in a beat sequencer, or as they call it, step sequencer track, a region rather. But if you just bring up the shortcut menu, you can create. Hello. Why is it not working? There we go. You can create a pattern region, and it will be created at the playhead. Boom. Like that. So there's an empty pattern region. Now every time you create one of these pattern regions, it is 4 bars long by default, regardless of the length of the pattern here. Because by default, I'm going to keep calling it beat sequencer. Sorry, the step sequencer by default offers 16 steps, but you can make it any amount of steps that you want, as you see here. Now the width is always completely filled. You can't zoom the width, but you can auto height adjust so that every lane is visible. And this window can be very tall, so you can really look at all the pads of a quite complex kit at a decent scale, right? All the steps rather, not pads. Or you can take off auto zoom and manually zoom to whatever you want, but the horizontal zoom is different. It's always fixed in width across. So with a 16 step pattern, it fills the entire width with the 16 steps. If I make it a 32 step pattern, it switches to show me all 32 steps. But if I click on that box there, I've now got the pattern divided into 2 blocks of 16. There's the first 16 steps, there's the second 16 steps, and if I go to 64 steps, it initially shows me all 64 steps, but if I click on that icon there, once it splits it into 2 lots of 32, click on it again, it splits it into 4 lots of 16. There's the first 16 steps, the second 16 steps, the third 16 steps, and the fourth 16 steps. Click on that to reduce it back to 2 32 steps. There's the first 32, there's the second 32. Click on that again, and we go back to seeing all 64 steps. So I'll set this to 16 steps. Right. Now the pattern sequencer can be played independently. So you can work on patterns without having to have your arrangement play, even though the region assigned to this pattern I'm editing is on the arrange area. I can play the step sequencer independently, work on my pattern, and when I've finally done it, it's there living there. Hit the normal play, and whatever I've composed will play back from that. But I can do it independently here. So basically, I'm not going to get into this on a massive depth, but the way it works is this is your default mode, step on off. There's a pattern library here as well, with patterns for drums, bass, and melodic instruments, and you can create and save your own patterns. There's user patterns there, right? These are your parameters for the whole pattern, the individually selected row or the individually selected step. And basically in the step on off mode, which is the default, you just put in drums where you want them to trigger, like a good old TR style grid, you know. So there's a 4 on the floor kick. Yeah, easy peasy, right? As simple as that. As simple as that. Steps in, steps out. Yeah. But if you switch to this second menu here, then you've got access to parameters for the individual steps, starting with velocity value. Right? Or, well, that's the main title, velocity value, because these are different values you can adjust. So I switch to velocity value, and now I can adjust the velocity of individual notes on the steps. I can adjust the gate time, and this is going to be relevant where you're sequencing a pitched instrument using the step sequencer. As I drag the gate, I don't know if you can just see that. Let's do it on this pad here. Gate, as I drag the gate down, you see that horizontal, that vertical line showing me the gate length, full gate length, and I'm reducing the length so it's shorter and shorter and shorter. Like, so you've got gate. You can tie steps together in the good old TB303 way when you're sequencing pitched instruments. Note allows you to change the note of any step. If you're in drum mode, as you move the ladder up and down, you hear the different drums triggering as you go to different pitches for that step note, and you see the title of the drum. But where you're doing pitched instruments, as you go up and down, you just hear different pitches, and you see the note name being displayed as you change it. So you can change the pitch, the note of any step from its default, whatever that is on that row. You can change the octave of any step. Now loop start end, this is an interesting one. There's an overall 16-step pattern, but I could make the hi-hat pattern just 8 steps long, just half a bar, and this will cycle around and keep in sync with the whole of the rest of the pattern. Yeah, and it also can have a different start time. So that one beat of 4 16 steps will just cycle round and round and round, playing in sync with the rest of the pattern, playing its full 16 steps. Which is very cool. Note repeats, great for doing your hi-hat things. You can have up to 16 note repeats on a step, which gives you real, you know, all that. 2 on that, 4 on that. All that stuff, all that good stuff, son. You know what I'm saying? Chance, this is broken as far as I can tell, because I know how this works on GarageBand for iOS. The idea is you give a note, a step, a percentage chance of firing off and triggering every time the pattern loops around, but it doesn't work. It's broken as far as I can see, because if you put it at 60 something percent or lower, it never triggers, and if you put it above 60 something percent, it never doesn't trigger. And this should work. If I were to give this note in GarageBand for iOS, if I gave this note a 70% chance of triggering, it would trigger on most of the loops as the pattern played round, but some of them it wouldn't trigger. And it genuinely is random. So this is supposed to work, a percentage chance of a note triggering, but as far as I can see, it's broken. Start offset, any note can have a start offset. Again, that's more useful when you're doing pitched instruments, but it does allow you to introduce subtle feel to individual notes. You can offset them in time, back in time, or forward in time. Right? And step rate, any individual note, they're 16ths by default, but they can be set to anything you want. So I could set this note to be an 8th. And therefore, this track, this lane, when the whole pattern plays, actually let's make this one a 16th, the default, and I'll just show you this so you can understand it better. If I put in a kick instead here, go back to step rate. Now if I make this kick at 8th, then at the point that the pattern plays along and it reaches this step on this kick track, on this kick lane, this step is now 2/16. So at the point the playing head goes past here, this lane will become 1/16 ahead of the other lanes. Sorry, 1/16 behind. And then when it cycles around to the beginning, it gets back in sync again because this step is 2/16. So from that step, it delays the rest of this pattern lane by a 16th because that's 2/16 on that step, right? So it allows you to do all that stuff. You can be very creative with drum patterns with that, but also it comes into its own when you're doing pitched instruments. And finally, skip. This is clever. I could skip all these. So again, this lane will play as part of the pattern, but when it gets to here, it skips this entire beat and jumps from that step to that step. So once this lane hits this step, it will become a whole quarter beat in front of the rest of the pattern until it cycles back around and resyncs again. Yeah, that's pretty clever. Yeah? All you have to remember is that, because it's very easy to be in the mode where you're editing one of the features for the steps, and you think, I'll put in an extra note there, and actually, oh damn it, I put a skip in there. So you have to remember to go back to step on off when you want to actually input and output notes. That's all. Yeah. All right, and look, you've got some basic things here. You can rotate your pattern steps. This is like a nudge. So you choose a track like the kick, and I can step everything. Oh, this is sorry for the whole pattern. I step everything forward and back in any direction I want. That's for the whole pattern. This stays where it is because it's a loop that ends here, right? Or I can do that for an individual track. Nudge notes on an individual lane or track forward or back by the step value. You've got, this is your overall step value for the pattern. The pattern can play forward, backwards, all the way to the end and reverse backwards, or I don't know what this is, some sort of random, right? And you can have the same per lane. Any lane can play in any direction you want. You can adjust the overall velocity. If I just show the velocity, look. Just show the velocity there. For the whole lane, I can adjust the velocity of all notes up or down, and they retain their relative values to each other as you do that. Mute and solo, etc, etc. Right? If you drop that list down, you can get into kit pieces, and you can make the lane play a different kit piece. You can do automation, etc. Right? And as I said, there's the overall settings for the pattern. There. How many steps, the step rate, the direction, for the whole pattern this is. Here's your swing. 8th or 16th swing can be applied with the swing value there. You can give it a pattern key and you can do a scale quantize for the whole pattern. And there's the settings for the selected row, and there's the settings for a selected step, if you want to get into all that. And again, finally, there is the pattern library. So I go to drums and load up Lin, where are we? Lin drum beat. Now, one thing is important. When you're doing that, make sure use project key is not ticked if you want to load drum patterns. So I load the Lin drum beat, boom. There's a Lin drum beat from the factory library which will play the hard bounce kit. There we go. Now, all the pattern tweaks that I've done to this pattern are in the pattern here. I've created this pattern by loading it from the library, the 32 steps Lin pattern. Here it is here, but it's repeated twice because this is 4 bars long. There's the pattern just once of it, 32 steps over 2 bars. There it is as 4 bars. So you see, you can do all that. Now, you can compose and create in the linear arrange area here as usual. Let's just quickly look at the live loops. You can compose in the linear area here in the traditional way to create patterns or entire sections of a song. And once you've done that, you can drag and drop any pattern or group of patterns or a whole song section across multiple tracks into the live loops to create a vertical section or an individual cell, right? Let's quickly look at these live loops, just very quickly. I'm going to come back and do full-on tutorials on these. But here's the live loops. Now, this is a factory demo. And the way live loops work is you click the arrow at the bottom and the vertical section plays. And you have a master timing. So the quantized start is a bar by default. And all the cells by default are set to the master quantized. So that means that if I click any other row to make the next vertical stack, which is a song section, right, let's say that's an intro. This is a opening section. This is my verse. This is my verse variation. This is my hook. And I can make these sections play in any order I want by clicking the arrows down here. I just have to click the arrow within the last bar of the previous section playing, and when that previous section ends, my newly clicked vertical section will begin playing. So I'll give you a quick demo of, this is one of the factory patterns, and I have to say, factory songs rather, or whatever they're called. And I have to say that these demos in Logic are nowhere near as good as the demos in GarageBand for iOS. They're really not as good at all, but just to give you an example. So here's one. And notice when I click to play this section, everything here grays, becomes muted. The playhead plays, but everything here becomes muted, right? Even if it was active before, like that, as soon as I hit play, this side mutes. Here we go. etc. So now, if you want to, you can compose and work completely in the live loops area and just ignore the traditional linear sequencing, close that section completely. You can record into any of these cells. Each vertical stack is a section of your song, and the patterns that play are for the individual tracks. So that pattern there is the pattern in this song section for that track, which is a kick drum. That pattern there is the pattern for that hard bass house kit in this vertical song section. So these are my song sections working across from left to right. Intro, verse, hook, breakdown, hook, whatever. So you can record directly into cells. So I can go to any section of the song. Let me just hit stop again so all those cells come out of trigger mode. Right? Oh, they would restart if I hit start again. And I can go to a cell like that, and you can record into cells. You can record audio into a cell. You can drag a MIDI loop or an audio loop from the library into a cell. You can record an instrument into the cell, whatever instrument is on the track, right? And build your songs like that. Cells can be any length, and they all play in sync. So some cells can play for 8 bars, other cells play for half a bar. Cells can play in any direction. They can have different offsets, etc., etc. You can have one-shot cells that don't loop round but just play once and stop, etc., etc. Right. Show, you can work like that, but you can work in just the traditional linear way with ignoring the live loops completely. And then if you want, you can use them at the end for working out arrangements or something. But you can use both screens simultaneously and adjust which bit, how much you're seeing of each. Which means that you can do things like, you're used to recording in this more traditional way. You can record into cells. It's not that hard, but it's nice to work in the traditional linear way. Like say here, if you wanted to use the beat sequencer. So let's say over this song section here, I wanted to program a beat in this pattern to go with this vertical section. Now at the top there are these arrows. If I click the arrow to point in that direction, this is the active window. When I hit play with the space bar, this side plays, this doesn't. If I click the arrows, this is the active window now, and everything here is muted. And when I hit play, these don't play because you trigger them with the arrows at the bottom there. But I can have this side all active and make any individual track on this side active. So this is now the active window, and I can make this and only this track active in this side of the window by using its arrow there. Now this and only this track is active while the rest of this section is active for the whole arrangement, whichever section of the arrangement I'm working on. So I can now take this section here, go to its trigger at the bottom, right click and do Cue Scene, and if I now hit play with the space bar, this section will play, but this pattern with a cycle loop around it will also play, and then I can edit it as I listen to it playing along with this vertical stack. Here we go. So this vertical section's playing, but this pattern's playing with it, and I can tweak and edit a pattern to go with this section. finished creating the pattern to go with this vertical section here. Now I've created it, I can say, well, how long do I want this pattern to be? Okay, these patterns in this vertical section have different lengths playing around. Look. Like this pattern plays for a long time, that cycles around once every bar, etc. They all play in different times, but they stay in sync. So I can say, well, I want this pattern to be either, because it's the same pattern repeating, so it doesn't really matter whether it's 4 bars long, 8 bars long, or what. I can make it 1 bar, and if I bring it into this vertical stack here, it will just keep repeating round, staying in sync with whichever is the longest pattern rotating in this stack. So I'll make it 1 bar long, bring it in, drop it on its track in that vertical stack, and that pattern is now going to play as part of this section. Etc. Right? So you can do all that. Okay, and then so you can basically build your song sections, because we're all good at building song grooves. Well, that's not the hard bit, is it? Let's be honest. Most of us can knock up a nice little groove lasting 8 bars long or 16 bars long. But it's turning all those different grooves and sections that we make into a linear arrangement that is usually the faff, the problem. And wouldn't it be nice if there was a way of doing it that was organic? Well, there is now. You build your individual sections, which you would do in the linear sense. But if we were working in the linear way, we'd build our section, copy it over, change it, copy it over, break down, copy it over, rebuild, copy it over, go for the hook by adding new things, and build our linear arrangement like that. But now what we can do is build our sections here, and then we can create a live DJ set, so to speak, of our linear arrangement over here by simply organically playing around with these different sections and record it over to this bit here. So let me get rid of that, get rid of that, take that cycle range out, play it to the start. Now to do this I need to bring in the pause button. And what I do is this. I activate the record button here. Let's say these are all my different song sections I've built, but I'm not sure what order I want them to go in. But I can now create a live mix of it, and if I need to after that, I can chop and move around the bits that I've recorded, or do it all again from scratch, whatever I like, or just do a section only, and then tweak it, and then do the next section, whatever I want. So, record is on, pause, and hit record, and then I'll trigger the first section that I want to play, and it will be recorded across here. Here we go. So one thing, there was a pause there because it's doing some sort of counting. Why is it doing the counting? Well, it did. All right, let's do that again. Come on, Z to undo. Yeah, all right, there's going to be a 1 bar counting. So pause, hit record, and trigger the first section. It will be recorded here, and then I can just trigger whichever sections I want and build my arrangement over here by just, organically working on my live DJ mix for my different sections, so to speak. And by the way, they've updated, I haven't tried it yet, but apparently they've updated Logic Remote so that you can trigger these with your fingers organically from your Logic Remote. Now, bear in mind one thing, as I trigger any individual vertical section, I can click on any other cell and it will begin playing in sync after the allotted quantized start. So at the end of whatever bar a section is playing, if I click another cell, it will begin playing in sync. Now, if the cell that I click to play with a vertical section that's playing is not playing, like for example, if I played this vertical stack, this track doesn't have a pattern playing in this vertical section. But if while this vertical section is playing, I was to click one of these patterns, they would begin playing in sync with this section of the song, and that will be recorded as well. Now with Logic Remote, you can activate more than one with your fingers by choosing two and pressing them at the same time with your fingers, and you can press these to make the play back in any order you want, etc. Okay, here we go. I'm going to record now a sort of a remix of my different song sections across here. Here we go. Etc. And you see what I mean? You can organically play around with your arrangement. These are all the different sections, and you can just experiment with how long they play. As you're listening, you're getting a feel for it, more like doing a DJ thing, right? And you end up with that linear arrangement recorded over here. And it plays back exactly the same. You know what I'm saying, son? Sweet as a nut. Activate that side, and now I can listen to it over here. And I can edit it over here. So if I decide, you know what, this opening section, I've got it playing for, let's move the whole thing forward so we get the bar count right. Yeah, this opening section plays for 8 bars, but you know what, actually I want it to be longer. Alright. Then you just grab all this, move it up 8 bars, and extend all this out. Now your intro is 16 bars long. And of course you can add additional instruments, new parts to the arrangement you've created, etc, etc. Now you can work the other way round, just finally to show you. I'm not sure of how I if there's a way to completely clear this song. I haven't found a way of doing it. Well, not that I've really looked, but like to completely clear this, I don't know. So you can add additional lanes. How do you do it? Insert scene at play. Oh, that's at playhead. Sorry. Insert empty scene. Okay, there's a new vertical empty. They call these scenes, but I'm saying these are like sections of the song, right? Like a verse, a chorus, a hook, a breakdown, whatever, with all the individual patterns for each track playing in that vertical stack. Right now, let's say I build my arrangement over here, but I want to turn it into a more DJ style set that I can trigger in any order I want on the fly. Okay, let's say I've built my arrangement here. That's my intro section. So I just grab all those patterns from my 16 bar intro section, drag and drop them over here, and I've created my intro section here. Now, in this original over here, the linear one, that pattern is just a single pattern that is 4 bars long, right? But it's looped 1, 2, 3 extra times to make it 16 bars. This is an 8 bar pattern looped twice, looped once to make 2 blocks of the same pattern, 8 bars each. And this is an 8 bar pattern or sound, again looped to be 16 bars in length. So as I've copied that and dragged that entire section and dropped it over here, this will be a 4 bar loop that will play round 4 times, as this loop, which is 8 bars, plays twice, or sorry, once. So that'll play, sorry, twice, 2 4 bar blocks, to keep in time with this playing 1 cycle to here. See, as you copy them over to here, Logic ignores these loops. It gives you the basic pattern, and you can let them play as many times as you want. So that will play here once, 8 bars. This pattern here will play once, 8 bars. And as these 2 patterns complete their 8 bar full cycle, this pattern will play twice to complete its 4 bar cycle, twice to stay in sync with these 2 that are 8 bars long, like this. Etc. And you can let it play around as often as you want. So there I've got my intro section. I can let that play around as often as I want if I trigger and build my set from this side. I then go to the next section here, grab all that, bring it over. That's going to be my next section. Boom, there it is. And let's say I don't like that vocal thing. All right, fine. Then I'll select the vocal thing. Come on, click to deselect, select that and get rid of. I don't want the vocal in that bit. Okay, then I create a new scene. Insert empty scene. Oh, I inserted it there. Sorry. Command Z to undo. Oh, we got one there anyway. Okay. So that's that section copied over to here from my linear arrangement. Let's say I built this linear arrangement over here. Okay, now we move on to the next section here. Right, so I just grab that. Doesn't matter about these loops, remember, because the loops will be worked out automatically here. If a pattern is a bar long, it will be a bar long here and just cycle around. If it's 4 bars long, it'll be 4 bars long and cycle around. Everything keeps in time with whatever is the longest pattern, and the loops are ignored. So I bring this section across, drop it, boom. And that's that new section now created. As you can see, this long pattern here, which is 8 bars long, takes 8 bars to cycle round, while that pattern, which is only 2 bars long, is that 2 bars? Yeah, 2 bars long, cycles round and round and round and round over and over again. As this pattern plays slower, its full 8 bars. Etc. And then I can think, all right, I like this section. I could copy the next section over from here and put it in here if I want, but I could also say, all right, duplicates. So I've duplicated this section, but in this next one I don't want some instruments playing, so I don't know, take out that, or I don't know what that is. What is that? That's a topper. Let's take that out. Keep the bass synth in, keep that beat in, keep the kicks in, keep those snares in, take out that effect. So this is slightly different. It's the same as this section, but missing that pattern and that pattern. And at any time, if I want to hear one of these patterns playing with this, then I can, like say that pattern, I'll just activate it so that track's active, because there's no that pattern, there's nothing on that track playing in this section, and that should play along in time. If I cue that up and hit play. And this section's playing in sync. Now if I put a cycle range around that, it would cycle around that. It should do, let's say, over that one 4-bar loop there. Is it 4 bars? Yeah, 4 bars. Let's do that again. Hit stop to get all this out of cue mode, re-cue this cue scene, and again, this is the active track only on this side. There's nothing playing in the section here. So this pattern will play and loop round with this section or any other section I play. Oh, except that time it didn't work. Come on, active please. Stop, come on, don't mess me up now. Stop, reset, thank you. Right, this is the active window, but that track I want to play. Now this should work. Cue scene, hit play, and that should play. Oh. You see, so at any time, while a linear section I've created is playing, I can either create new patterns here and experiment with them, and then when I've got it right, drag and drop it in to go with whatever section I'm working on, or I can just, you know, or I can just have a section over here, play and listen to it, see if it works, and then go, yeah, you know what, that works. But I want that in a different section, so what I'll do is I'll duplicate this section across and just bring this pattern into that, so it's in that section. These are subtly different now. Etc. Bring in my hard bounce pattern and put it in that pattern, in that section. You know, whatever I want. Let's take that out. Put it back over there, or wherever it was. Let's have this effects riser in that section. You know, I'm dragging and moving it from there, but if I had to hold down Alt, I should be able to copy it across. There you go. Etc. So you can play each side off each other, so to speak. Yeah, you can work exclusively in this section, exclusively in that section. You can create arrangements, sections here, and drop them over here, and then play them back live. And it's all about that feel thing. Like in the old days, this is for guys like me, for my generation who grew up doing dance music on hardware, this is how we'd build our arrangements. We'd have our patterns. Pattern 1, intro, pattern 2, pattern 3, pattern 4, and each pattern would be a different section of the music, a breakdown, a build, a hook, an intro, whatever. And we flip between them to build our arrangements live by pressing the buttons. And you could take that out and do that live. Well, this gives you all that same ability. So you can build arrangement sections here and drop them in here. You can build whole linear songs here and copy every arrangement part over to build sections here, and then work on full linear arrangements by playing them back from here and recording it across here. You can have sections playing here and work on individual patterns over here. You can have sections playing here and record in new stuff over here, or record direct into the cells, etc., etc. Yeah, it's very, very versatile. When you get into it on a deep level, it's more than just a straight DJing tool, right? But there you go. I won't go any further with it than that, but you get the idea. I've given you a few ideas of some of the stuff you can do with it, right? I don't know if you're getting this from other people out there showing off Logic 10.5, but that's just a taster of the sort of techniques that you can do with live loops. You can build your linear parts of your song here, bring them over here into sections, then you can take this out and DJ your tracks live, letting a section play as long as you want to work the crowd. Dropping bits out of a section as a whole section plays. Clicking on other loops, which will take over on a row. If this section vertically is playing here, that pattern will play as part of it. But if I click on any of these other patterns, that will stop playing and the new one will take over at the start of the next bar. Now all these cells, as they can be loop, where they're circular like that, or they can be one shot like that's a one shot that plays once all the way through and stops. They can play forward, reverse, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, and they all just stay in time with each other. So you can use this for live work. And again, it works with the Logic. Apparently, I haven't tried it yet, but it works with the new Logic Remote. Has been updated so that you can trigger these sections from Logic Remote by pressing with your fingers. You can tap on individual patterns to make them play with another section with your fingers, which means you can tap on two or more with 2 or 3 fingers, and they'll begin playing with the vertical section that's currently playing, etc. You can do all that stuff with your fingers, hands-on. So you can build put all your song sections for one of your tracks here, and then you can take your laptop out live, or even a desktop, I suppose, and play back your sets live, and every time you can play it back different. You can work that set like a DJ. You can work each song like a DJ, letting sections play as long as you want, going back to previous sections, dropping parts out of sections, anything you like. And in that respect, it's incredibly powerful, because one of the biggest pains with working in the traditional linear way, like that, let me just activate that section again. One of the biggest pains with the traditional linear way of sequencing is, yes, it's very easy, if you've got a bit of a groove in you and you've got a bit of talent, whatever, it's very easy to create a groove. But building that into a linear arrangement that works across the length, that's the hardest thing of all. And that's why when it comes to making dance tracks, DJs who've got no musical knowledge at all, let's say they haven't, if you give them a bunch of loops and patterns, they'll build something that really works on a dance floor, because they know how to build a linear piece of music for a dance floor, whereas musicians don't. Yeah. So this gives us this kind of incredible compositional ability, the live loops, but it also really importantly gives us incredible power for making arrangements. Because yes, we can choose to work in the traditional linear way, but then we can copy all of our individual sections of our song across to a vertical loop section, and then we can practice with different ways of firing those sections off, letting them play for different lengths of time. Yeah, actually that works if I let that section play for 16 bars. Then I bring in that section. Then go back to that section, whatever you like, you know. I'm telling you, mate. Hey, pardon me. So it's there you go. That's all I'm going to say for now. But that's giving you a good intro to the joys of Logic Pro X 10.5. As I say, I'm going to obviously now work on full, proper tutorials, organised, showing you all the stuff. But I've given you enough tasters there for you to get a sense of what's going on. I hope this is useful to you. Subscribe to the channel, but more importantly, get the word out. You know, on social media, any forums that you use, get the word out about this channel. Comments, let's hear them below. Anything you want to know. And as I said, I'll come back with proper in-depth tutorials showing you all the stuff for the new beat or step sequencer, as they call it, the drum machine designer, the sampler, the quick sampler, the drum synth, and more importantly, this whole live loop thing is we're gonna have to do multiple tutorials on this to get through all the different things you can do, because I think it's fair to say that a lot of the stuff you're going to read about this out there, or videos you're going to watch, are going to show you in a very basic sense what it can do. But it's when you get into the deep things you can do that it starts to really come alive. And I've given you a little taster of that, right? All right. Hope that's useful. Any comments, leave them below. See you for the next one.